Hi everybody, welcome to Border Crossing with Dan DeMarco, with me, Dan DeMarco, and with me as always is my co-host, Luna the Wonder Dog. She's in the back seat here. We're just getting ready to leave my home here, heading to the border. This is episode 1, the basics of border crossing. My intent with this episode is basically just to talk about some of the more basic things that you need to know when crossing the border from Mexico into the U.S. in the Baja California region. Right now I'm in my neighborhood of San Antonio del Mar, which is just north of Rosarito, Mexico, and south of Tijuana. It's kind of nestled in between. Not sure what this person's doing here, but it is a Saturday. It's about 2 o'clock. Heading to the border. I've got to go up to the U.S. I'm going out of town tomorrow and meet my wife up in San Diego. That's why I'm heading across the border today. I don't often cross on Saturday afternoon, so I don't really know what to expect as far as traffic and such. What the heck's going on here? One of the things about my neighborhood, many neighborhoods actually in Mexico are like this. You have very skinny streets. Come on. Well, eventually I'll get out of here. In any event, sorry it's been so long since I got the first episode out, the episode 0, which was kind of like the background and introductions. Been pretty crazy the past few weeks. My parents were in town first from the U.S., visiting Mexico for the first time, or at least visiting this part of Mexico for the first time. And I think they had a pretty good time. And also, my car that I'm sitting in now, my 2015 Honda Fit, was actually broken into on the U.S. side of the border. So everyone has this impression of Mexico as being so dangerous or whatnot, but really, it's really not dangerous at all. And I'll talk about that a lot as we go. Maybe not in this episode so much, but the security situation here has been pretty good in my mind. But my car got broken into on the U.S. side in a parking lot there. We have cars parked on both sides of the border. That's because of my wife who has to cross the border on foot. That's actually come to a close now. She just got approved finally for global entry for Sentri, which will really, really improve her life and mine as well. We're going to really speed things up for both of us. But the basics. So what do you need to know? There's basically 3, let's say, classes of crossing. I don't know what you call them, classes, but there's, you wait till we got in here, but it's awfully bumpy and loud. It'll take about maybe 45 minutes to get to the border, if that, maybe 30 minutes or so. Really kind of varies depending on traffic. Like I said, I don't know what to expect at the border. I haven't checked any of the normal sources that I might check, and there's a few different sources you can check to get information on what's happening at the border traffic-wise. I'll talk about that at some point. Again, maybe not today, but at some point. We're going to have a lot of time. This is a fairly long and drawn-out trip across the border. It can be quite really long depending on the situation there. Hopefully today it won't be so bad. Saturday afternoon, I'm just guessing that it's not going to be all that bad. As far as I know, there's no major holidays on either side of the border. There's nothing unusual happening. It should be a relatively painless crossing. Of course, every time I say that, that's not the case. My neighborhood of San Antonio del Mar is a gated community. The many communities in Mexico are like this. So it has its own security force, basically. In my mind, it's really not needed, but you'll see them as we pull out here. As usual, the weather's really nice, and as almost always, it's like Car says, it's 72 degrees out. It's sunny. It's a little bit overcast, which is kind of unusual. Usually it's just bright sun here most of the time. I've actually got to get gas as well here. I didn't realize that. Alright, we're now out of the neighborhood. We're actually going to be going south first, so even though the border is north of where I am, because of the way my neighborhood's structured, I have to actually go south from one exit and actually then turn around and start heading north. It's a little bit frustrating. This is the Quoto, Route 1. There's two different Route 1s in Mexico that go north-south, basically. One's called the Quoto, one's called the Libre. The Quoto is a toll road. You'll see we're going to be going through a toll here. The Libre is the free version of the Quoto, and the Libre's got all kinds of stops, and all the shops and stuff are along that, but it takes forever. The Quoto is basically a highway, freeway. Not like what you see in the U.S. It's quite well maintained. It's in really good shape. Driving in Mexico is really not difficult at all, in case you were wondering. It's just like the U.S. as far as the rules and laws. The one thing I would say is there is more traffic, especially when you get into Tijuana. There's a lot fewer stoplights and a lot more stop signs and roundabouts. So you might think that would be a recipe for chaos, but it actually works quite well as long as the people obey sort of the regular order. And it seems like for the most part people in Mexico do, and I feel like the Mexican drivers are actually quite good and quite polite, maybe more so than the U.S. side. Definitely compared to other foreign countries I've driven in, which is quite a few. They're one of the tops. Very polite. You don't have all the horn honking that you get in big cities, but we'll see when we get to Tijuana. It's actually pretty quiet, which is really actually quite surprising given the amount of traffic sometimes. So here we'll be getting off and just turning around. Hopefully my camera's not too shaky there. I got a new mount. One of the things that got stolen out of the car, in addition to our neighborhood pass, was the mount for my phone. Fortunately, nothing else got stolen. It was actually kind of unusual. There was cash in the car that wasn't taken. There were some other valuables as well that were not taken. But they took my neighborhood pass, which is the pass that is a hang tag basically that you need to get into to access my neighborhood. And they also kind of scarily took my address out of my registration. They actually cut it out of the registration. That's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. They didn't take the actual entire registration. They cut out just the address, my home address. Unfortunately, that address is like 3 addresses ago from where I actually live. There's nothing they could probably really do with that, but it's just an unusual thing. And the hang tag, I can see why people might want that to try to get in the neighborhood. But again, this happened on the U.S. side, so I'm not sure what this person or persons was thinking. Turns out, I thought they had actually broken in, but it turns out the right rear door, there's a short in it or something, so the automatic locks are not actually locking it every single time. So I have to actually check that every single time, and I did not realize that. So the back door was actually open. Now this parking lot has 24/7 security. It does have cameras. We did file a police report, but we haven't heard a thing since about a week ago, I guess, when this happened. I'm not expecting to hear anything either. Speed limits on the highway in Mexico very similar to the U.S. I mean, this is 110 kilometers an hour, which is roughly 65 miles per hour. Not a lot of people getting pulled over in Mexico by the police. They have bigger things to worry about, I guess. But it does happen, especially for people who are driving really crazy. I mean, they're really looking for the really high level offender. They're really looking at people that are really going crazy, speeding like mad, and that does happen actually. But your everyday average speeder is probably not going to get pulled over. Pretty low probability of that. So the camera is mounted on my dash here. It's pointed a little bit off to the right, which would be the east. So you can't see the ocean off to my left here, but it's really quite gorgeous. On the trip back, I don't know if I'll record the trip back today, but at some point I'll record a trip into Mexico and you get to see what it actually looks like. It's quite nice. So, the border crossing. So basically what you have is three, at least by car, okay, you have 3 different options. Basically you have what's called Sentri or global entry, which is sort of the highest level clearance, the fastest, the easiest to get through. There's what's called the ready lanes, which is sort of the second level. The second level is supposed to be also quite quick, but it really isn't. And then there's the lowest level, which is called all traffic, or the general lanes. You don't want to be in the general lanes. So at a high level, in general, the Sentri crossings take between 30 minutes and an hour and a half, maybe at most. Okay, worst case, I think the longest it's ever taken me is 2 hours to get across. So generally though, it's in that 20 to 30 minute range, sometimes faster than that. So it goes relatively quickly, again, depending on lots of factors. Ready lane is another story. That can take anywhere from 45 minutes, probably is going to be the quickest you're going to get across there, except in very, very rare occasions in the very late evenings and such. So to as long as 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6, or even more hours of waiting in line to get across into the ready lanes. All traffic, you can forget about it. To the general lines, you're talking about minimum of an hour, probably 3, 4. Not unheard of to sit overnight in the general lanes. It's really, really crazy. The border. Again, I'm talking about the San Isidro border crossing here. There are 3. It actually is the most heavily trafficked land border crossing in the world. There are 3 major border crossings in this region of California, Mexico, Baja California, where I live. San Isidro, Otay Mesa, and Tecate, and that's from west to east. That's how they're lined up, with San Isidro being by far the most popular, Otay Mesa being the second most, and it's also quite a bit smaller. And then Tecate being sort of a rural crossing. It's very, very rarely used by most people. It's more of an industrial and rural crossing, agricultural crossing. but you can use it, and sometimes it comes in handy, even though it's a 45-minute drive out of the way to get to. If the other two border crossings are totally stacked up, you can take the drive out to Tecate and usually get across relatively quickly. Otay, occasionally I'll go to. It's only about an additional 20 minutes, but it makes things a little bit harder when you get across the border. You gotta circle back, and I try to avoid it if I can. But sometimes when a CD road is just way too crazy, you can shoot over to Otay and cross there a little bit more quickly. Just a heads up, I don't know. Actually, I sent a note to Customs and Border Patrol asking about recording crossing the border, recording if it was allowed or not. It's definitely not allowed for pedestrians. I know that for a fact. There's all kinds of signs up where you cross as a pedestrian talking about no recording equipment is allowed, that sort of thing. But for the traffic, for the driving lanes, I've not seen any signs. And there's a bunch of signs talking about what's prohibited and what's what you can't do. Right? There's nothing about recording equipment. But just to be sure, I wanted to send a note. Wanted to find out for sure. I don't want to have jeopardize my global entry, my Sentri. If I lost that, it'd be a total disaster by doing something that's illegal or not allowed. So I'm going to turn the camera off before I actually cross. I'm going to go as far as I can and then turn the camera off, and I'll turn it back on briefly after I make it across, assuming I do make it across. This part of Mexico, I think, is really quite nice. It's about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 miles south of the border. I think when you first cross the border, it's kind of funny. When you first cross as a newcomer here, and you look at Tijuana, because you come into a part of Tijuana that's not necessarily the best part of Tijuana. Not that there's all that many great parts, but it's not that. It doesn't make a very favorable impression of Mexico. But you go about 2 more miles, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, and it reminds you of some of the nicest places on the coast of the U.S. I sort of think they do that on purpose, keep more people out. You come in and you see this. I've never come back here. This place is a piece of crap, but really all you had to do was keep going a little bit further, and you would have seen that it actually is really, really very nice. There's a toll here. Again, this is the quota, so there's a toll. This is the one toll I have to pay basically every day going to and from the U.S. or when I go to the U.S. Hardly every day. I probably cross maybe once a week on average. Try to avoid it as much as I can. I have to for work. To get up to the airport and such. I'm traveling quite a bit. Actually, I probably cross on average at least 2 times a week, I guess I'd say. The toll is 40 pesos. It's been that way since I moved down here, which is hardly anything. $2.05, I think, US. They don't take credit cards. There is a what they call, I don't know what they call it, but there's a sort of an easy pass type lane. We have not been able to figure out yet exactly how you get the pass that you need to use it. Sometimes doing things in Mexico can be quite difficult, things like that, administrative type things. Getting, Jen, my wife just got her residency. That took an unbelievable amount of effort to work through the system, because their systems here are actually very complex and very paper heavy. Very procedural oriented. I guess probably a lot like the U.S., probably like the immigration systems around the world, really, but it was difficult, to say the least. But she's really happy having her global entry now. She'll be able to use the Sentri lane, which is what I'm going to use today. Whereas, as I said previously, we had a car parked at a parking lot in Tijuana and a parking lot just across the border of the U.S. She would drive to that parking lot in the morning, walk across, grab the other car, go to work, and then do the reverse coming home. And it was taking her 2 to 3 hours both directions, basically every day, Monday through Friday. Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias. Buen día. Wow, look at the big line of cars. I don't know if you can see to your left. Big line of cars coming down here, going into the back, actually backed up. That's kind of unusual to see. Not sure what that's about. I know a lot of people do come down here for the weekends. This is a very, very popular spot. Boy, that is really backed up. I won't be back down here until later this evening, so hopefully this is all cleared out by the time I'm coming down this way. Hey, I don't think I've ever seen it that far. Yeah, I was in the U.S. yesterday, actually. I had to return Friday night, the worst time possible to be coming into Mexico, because people just come down streaming into Tijuana for the weekend, and it was a nightmare. It took me 3.5 hours to get home from San Diego. I was driving through rush hour traffic in San Diego, number one, which is not that great to begin with. And then everybody, of course, going into Tijuana, so it took forever. And I'll have to go back to the U.S. again tomorrow because I'm going to the airport to leave for my trips. I'll probably do another episode of this tomorrow as well. Anyway, if you are thinking about moving down here, or if you've ever considered it, or maybe you just moved down here, hopefully you have your little entry. It took Jen 6 months actually to get her conditional approval. She actually flew to Phoenix, drove to Vegas. Wasn't gonna fly to Phoenix. Drove to Vegas today to go do her interview, and then she was approved there in her interview. I just heard from her, which is great news. Now, if you don't have that, it's just really a nightmare. Even with it, it's not all that great, but it's manageable. And the advantages, I think, are well outweigh the struggle at the border. There is a new crossing being built. I just found out it's going to be done at the end of 2024. Apparently, that should take a lot of the pressure off San Ysidro, I think. I hope. At least that's the idea. We'll see if it happens or how long it actually takes. But there was an agreement signed between the government of California and the government of Mexico. So it's a done deal. I mean, it is happening, supposedly. It's actually a little on the heavy side. I cannot forget to get gas here because I am almost out. Gas in Mexico. One of the great things about Mexico is that gas is subsidized by the government here. So even though it's expensive right now, it's running about $3 to $3.50 a gallon, 20 pesos per liter, roughly 22 pesos per liter, say. But it's running $5, $6, or $7 a gallon up in San Diego, so it still feels like a bargain compared to what you are paying up in California and in the San Diego region. So I always get gas here in Mexico, and I try to avoid getting it in the U.S. as much as I can. All gas stations in Mexico are full service. There is no pumping your own gas, not an option. Sort of a jobs program, I think. But it's kind of nice. But also kind of frustrating when you run into lines like this. You can get ripped off at gas stations in Mexico. It's not as bad as people probably say. Again, if you've heard rumors about how people rip you off at the gas stations. If you go to a reputable brand name like a BP or a Pemex, one of the major stations, they really don't rip you off. The one thing I would say is don't just say fill it up. You really want to say exactly how much gas you want. So obviously then figure out how many liters go in your tank, and then just ask for that amount. Based, and you can kind of do the math to determine how much exactly you want to get. I like to pay in cash also. It just makes things faster and easier. Many transactions in Mexico are still cash. It's more of a cash-based economy for sure. For the U.S., they do take credit cards almost everywhere, but certainly not everywhere. There are definitely places that don't. Or really just kind of frown on it. So I do carry cash around, and not a big deal for me. Some people, but I've got no problem with it. So my tank takes about 40 liters to fill, but I'm only think I want to put 30 in. I don't think if I put 40, it might not. Maybe I have a little bit left here, so. Yeah, and so there's regular and premium are the two kinds of gas that you can get. Regular, again, I heard some rumors before I moved down here about how the regular gas was really crappy and how it was like it's crap in it. It wasn't like as good as the U.S. gas, but that actually is not the case. It's the same octane level as regular in the regular unleaded in the U.S. 87 octane. I was when I first moved down here getting premium every time, which is we're hearing all these rumors about how crappy the gas was, but came to find out through a little research and talking with people that's not the case at all, and I've been getting regular. And premium is running, let's see, 24.09 per liter right now, and regular is 21. So it's a 3 peso per liter difference between regular and premium, which is fairly significant. Gas stations are everywhere, just like the U.S. You can't go more than 10 feet without seems like hitting a gas station. So you don't have to worry about that. At least, again, this part of the country. Important to understand that where I live in Mexico, the Baja California region is not representative of a lot of the country. It's kind of its own little unique thing. It's got such a blend of the U.S. and Mexican cultures, I guess, if I call it, and language too. You can absolutely get by here without speaking a lick of Spanish. It's not advised. You really should learn some of the language. I'm doing pretty poorly myself, but I'm getting there. But it's much appreciated if you do try to speak Spanish, and I think there's a lot of patience given, a lot of credit given to people who try. And I've not had a bad experience yet. With saying, hey, I'm learning. I'm just, I don't know the language all that well. People are always friendly, and so far have been friendly. There is a little bit of anti-Americanism, very little. Occasionally you get like a retail store or something, you get somebody that's just a real jerk because once they find out you're an American, because they can tell right away basically by your accent. But almost none. I mean, everybody, for the most part, everybody's super friendly here and used to the bilingual thing. Buenas tardes, 30 litros, regular.
¿Cuánto?
30,
¿Regular?
regular.
Aire no hay, joven. ¿Cero?
So that. That's so that actually filled me up exactly to the top. So I guessed right there with the 30 liters, and it was 620 pesos. It was about 20 bucks or so for my tank. That would have been about 25 bucks or so to fill my tank, and that would have been probably 50 bucks in the U.S. for the same. So where am I going? So the route I'm taking today is I'm going to, because I have no idea what the situation is at the border as far as traffic, I'm going to take the most conservative route, or what I call my Route A or Route 1, my standard basic route, I guess you could call it. There's many, many ways to get to the border, and there's so many roads in Tijuana, different ways, back ways you can go to get there faster. But the thing is, the key here is you gotta get to the back of the line. There's no cutting of the line here. If you cut the lines, you can get yourself in serious trouble. I mean, actual physical jeopardy. People will actually attack you, including people that work in the lines. I've seen it myself. People who've tried to cut. So you can't cut the lines. So that means if you guess wrong and you go to a road that puts you more towards the front of the line, but you're not at the back of the line, you got to backtrack. And sometimes when you backtrack, sometimes you can't backtrack very easily. In fact, most of the times you can't. And so you end up getting lost and such. And believe me, the first few months I was down here, I was completely lost. I've been down here about, I guess, 6 months now or so, and I pretty much got lost everywhere you can get lost, going to San Ysidro at least. And I basically know where I'm going now. I still occasionally am a little bit confused as to what's what. The roads are really confusing here. GPS is not all that reliable. Google Maps is not super reliable. The way the roads are, they're just crazy roads here in Tijuana, very unusual. And I also put a cell phone signal on a fairly regular basis. I'm with Verizon, maybe not the best. AT&T's probably got better coverage here. I think if you are going to move down here, I might suggest you look at AT&T. Verizon's okay. I have it through my work, so that's why I have to kind of stuck with it. But I do have gaps in coverage right here to the border. To my left here is the border wall. You can see it maybe. The rust-colored monstrosity right there. That's it. And now we're coming into Tijuana, and that's what you'll see here off to your right. The kind of the slums of Tijuana. It's probably one of the worst parts of Tijuana. But even the worst parts of Tijuana gets a bad rap too. Really, in my mind, it's been fine. I mean, it's not. It's got dangerous parts just like any other city as far as I can tell. I feel actually a lot safer here, and even in Tijuana compared to where I come from in Louisville, Kentucky, because everyone there's got a gun, and nobody here carries guns except for the police and of course the cartels. But you don't really see the cartels, not the police, but the military police, the regular municipal police don't carry weapons. I don't believe. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know if they do or not. I can't recall seeing that. But there's basically three levels of policing that happen. You have the kind of the municipal, what they call the municipal police, which would be like kind of like your state cops, I guess, in the U.S. And then you have the military, and the military is basically the feds, if you will. And they carry the guns. They drive around in these trucks with the balaclavas and the big guns, looking very intimidating. But in general, the only thing I've ever seen them doing is helping people stranded on the side of the road. Same thing with the police. I've seen definitely some people get pulled over and such, but I haven't seen any sort of violent activity. I haven't seen any crime. I haven't witnessed any crime or been involved in any crime other than, again, my car getting broken into in the U.S. I guess maybe fortunately, but to me it feels like the security situation here is really solid. I know that recently there was this so-called riots or this gun battle that broke out at a prison here in Tijuana, I guess, and like some cars being burnt, etc. And if you watch the U.S. news, it was like gun battles in the streets of Tijuana. It's like a third world country down here. People are diving for cover and stuff. I was actually crossing the border the day that happened. People at the border crossing had no idea anything was even unusual was even happening, and you couldn't tell by the you walk across the border. It looked exactly like any other day. There was no smoke in the distance. There was no gunfire. There was the same amount of security as there always is. Oh, this is not a good sign. So we're already backed up. Wow. Okay, this is probably not a great sign here. Typically, it does not back up this far. Well, it's a good thing we're going the most conservative route because we definitely want to do that now because clearly there's a lot of traffic here going to the border. I tell you, you just can't guess right. Every time you think it's going to be light, it's heavy. Every time you think it's going to be heavy, it's light. Oh, well, it's still heavy. Boy, this is really backed up. I guess my hope is that this is for the ready lanes and maybe there's an accident or something up here. This is the only road in and out of this part of Mexico, really, north-south. So we definitely can see a lot of traffic in both directions. But as I was saying, you got to find the back of the line because if you don't, you can't cut. And so my most conservative route takes me to a spot that I know is always going to be at least the back of the line. So I've never, not once since I've been here, seen traffic back up past, actually, sorry, one time, and it was a complete nightmare. The one time that it did happen, that there was traffic backed up to where I'm going, what I call the back of the line, my safe back of the line spot, my most conservative route. I actually take this route a lot more than probably I need to, because I'm always playing it kind of conservative. I just don't want to get stuck and get lost. The worst thing that can happen, and it can happen, is you end up in the wrong line. And there's certain points of no return where if you get in the line and you can't get out, and then you're stuck. And if it's a huge backup, you're going to be stuck there for a very long time potentially. When I first moved down here, that was one of my biggest fears, was that I don't know, I'm going to end up in the general line or whatever, and then past the point of no return, and then I'm just stuck there all day. What else about the border? What can I tell you? I think in general the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, they've got a tough job. They do a good job, you know, with what they do, but they're awfully they're usually pretty grumpy. Rarely they don't smile all that much, and they tend to be, you know, professional, but also pretty aggressive, I would say, in their attitude, even for, you know, U.S. It doesn't really matter U.S. citizen or not. They sort of take the you're a criminal first approach to policing the border. Which is fine, and I get it. You know, they take a lot of shit for doing their job. In contrast, when you cross into Mexico, it's a much more pleasant experience. And I did have some interactions with Mexican immigration officials when we first moved down here. We had no clue what we were doing. We were trying to bring stuff across the border, and we got pulled over once, and you know, we had a bed, which you're not allowed to bring across the border. Anyways, we got pulled over, and and they were just super nice. You know, they're very professional. They weren't like my best buds or anything, but they also were, let's say, calm demeanor, very professional. Same thing happened. I've actually been pulled into secondary twice now on the way into the U.S., which is absolutely ridiculous given the fact that that's Sentri, global entry. But in any case, pulled over twice in a secondary, and it's like, you know, you are guilty until proven innocent. Mostly what they're trying to stop, I think, is people trafficking, of course, and agricultural smuggling, much more so than I think than drugs or anything like that. They really are. The agricultural thing is big. If you drive along the border on the U.S. side, there's USDA checkpoints and such. So if you are moving out here, keep that in mind. You definitely want to have, especially if you have animals, you got to have all their paperwork, the vaccine records, veterinary records, etc., because you will potentially be stopped and asked to see that stuff. I always have I have a book, I would say, I don't know what to call it, an attaché, like a briefcase kind of thing that I bring with. It's like a fireproof briefcase that I bring with me every time I go to the border. It has all my documents. That includes my dog, that includes Luna's, or whatever animal I happen to have in the car at the time. Yesterday I had 3 cats in the car, I was bringing across, but today it's just Luna. So I have all of her paperwork in here, so that's her veterinary records or her vaccination records. Just in case. I've never actually been asked for that information, but they can ask, and they may. Especially when you're new. One of the things that they keep track of every time you cross the border, right? They have a record of that. And so when you're new, when you first move down here, they know that. And so you tend to get, picked on more, if you will, because they want to make sure you're doing the right thing, you know what you're doing. And often you don't. That's one of the things about moving down here, that one of the reasons I'm doing the show here, or doing the recording here, is because there's no resources really, not reliable resources about what actually to do or how to do certain things. You just sort of learn, and of course you make tons of mistakes when you do it that way. I'm trying to help, hopefully some people avoid some of these stupid mistakes that we made, like the thing about bringing a bed across the border, a mattress, something you do not want to do without declaring it. And how you actually go about declaring items and bringing them into Mexico is whole other story. Maybe we'll talk about at some point. It's not all that easy. And again, there's no real place you can go to learn how to actually do it without actually doing it. We still have a storage locker in San Diego with the remains of our stuff. We brought everything across basically, almost one carload at a time, because of the issues with declaring. You can only bring in $300 per person. This is a personal exemption worth of stuff each trip across, right? And so we moved all of our stuff out here. We're moving it across at $300 less at a time. And if they challenge you, you have to be able to, account for it, and you have to be right. Basically, you have to have some justification for why you're valuing things the way that you are. My wife was actually here like 3 months before I was. She did most of the legwork on this one. She did bring a couple truckloads across, declared them, and that's where we learned about how to do the declaration thing. But the last of the stuff we've just been trickling across. one carload at a time. I haven't been pulled over coming into Mexico, gosh, no, very, very long time, and very few are actually. They try to keep traffic moving, and the economy is so reliant on traffic from the U.S. They do the best they can to keep that traffic moving quickly. Signage down here is not great. I mean, maybe you can see coming up here, you'll see this sign. It's the Sentri radio lane with an arrow pointing that way. It was, I guess, not designed for this amount of traffic, and so signs are not in the right place necessarily all the time to tell you where to go. And I just, you don't want to be relying on signs to help you guide you to where you should go, because you're not gonna get there. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they make no sense. You get like that kind of right-ish pointing arrow, and there's like 3 different places you can go to the right that all look the same, and so it's like, just don't rely on that. The only way to really do it is to do it. Or again, you can watch me do it. You can copy what I'm doing, because I wish I would have had a video like this. There's a couple times I went down to the border so I could see what other people were doing, or how they were getting there. Because again, there's just so many ways you can do it. And this is really crazy traffic-wise. At least it's moving though, not stopped. It's not yet. We're still a long ways from the crossing. I mean, a long ways. We're maybe halfway there. I said I left about 1:48. It's now 2:20. It's kind of fun at the border. There's all kinds of people. There's all kinds of like stuff going on. There's vendors selling stuff, food, tchotchkes, whatever, trinkets, all kinds of different stuff you can buy. People playing music usually, people singing. It's kind of fun. But it's also frustrating. And I think that's one of the reasons people come down. They go down there because you're sitting there so much. That's why they're trying to sell stuff to you first. But the entertainment's also helpful. People are always generally pretty frustrated. I feel for them, especially for the new people. Again, it's one of the reasons I'm doing these recordings, hopefully to help, at least somewhat. One of the things you could do, if you don't want to listen to me babble on, is just fast forward so you can kind of see the route that I am taking and try to copy that. I think this route is a good route. It's a good, easy, very easy for by Tijuana standards to get you to the back of the line, and it works every time. And it's rarely, I mean, there's traffic along it, and there will be traffic at the end, but again, you're basically guaranteed to get to the end of the line every time. I tried to put music on before and it actually stopped the recording. There's got to be a way to do that, have the recording going and have music playing, but or not stop the recording, but I can't figure out exactly how to do it. I may have to break this up into 2 and actually stop it to get some music going because it's driving nuts. Don't know the names of the streets and such. I really have not learned those things, so I'm not going to be giving you street names. You're going to have to just basically go by look here in terms of where I'm going. I go by landmarks basically. I did mention that there's resources for determining how busy it is at the border. So U.S. Customs and Border Patrol has an app which is notoriously not accurate. I don't really rely on it at all. It's even for a very rough estimate, sometimes it's way off. So I try not to use it. There's a couple other private ones that you have to pay for that have cameras, and that's the CBP one doesn't have cameras. But the thing is with the cameras, it's great, but you have to know what you're looking at, which means you have to know the landmarks, which means for new people, it's not all that helpful because you don't know what the heck these cameras are pointing at. You don't know what it means. But after you've been down at the border for a while, you kind of understand where they're pointing and what that means as far as where the traffic's at. I'll give you the names at some point. I just can't at the moment. It's escaping what the one is called that my wife likes to use. It's also quite good. There's also any number of Facebook groups, border coalition groups, or whatever that'll tell you that kind of talk about what the situation is, particularly for people crossing on foot. There's a lively bunch of groups that talk about how the situation is at any given time. So you can check those posts before you leave in the morning or whatever, and see what's happening, the people that are there. I don't use that stuff very often. I kind of just roll the dice. You can't really win even if you use this stuff. You gotta go to the U.S. You gotta go, right? You gotta go home. You gotta go home. So you're gonna have to fight the traffic, or you hopefully get lucky. Maybe you don't, but it's hard. Yikes! My camera my new mount here just busted off. Sorry about that.